Welcome back to Crit and Crit. I am Axion.
I'm Sent.
We are continuing our exploration of La-Mulana and our discussion of Pyramids by Terry Pratchett. Ow. Stupid cat.
You know, if they really were Egyptian cats, you could call them something quite insulting.
What?
Bastards.
Boo.
Because bast, you see, is...
Yes, I get the joke. Boo.
What? Me making awesome puns is kind of the tradition on this channel.
And me booing them is also.
Which is convenient, considering our topic for today.
So, the primary conflict in Pyramids is essentially, when simplified, down to a difference of focus between tradition and progress. Namely, Dios, the High Priest, wants to maintain the traditions of Jelly Baby into perpetuity, and the new king, Tepik, wants to initiate some improvements, some changes, some alterations that will, he believes, make the world a better place. I hate the bats. I hate the bats so much.
They drive you batty. But I do think it's interesting to note just how thorough the force of tradition is in Jelly Baby. It's not just we're stuck with this because of Dios. It's everyone has always followed them, always, always, always. Their grandparents followed them, their grandparents followed them. This is the way it has always been. We will never question it, even when it is something that it is actively leading to personal severe harm to ourselves.
There we go. That's what I was supposed to do. Stupid bat cost me money.
And honestly, I think the best instance of this is shown when Tepik goes to break Tracy out of prison.
Yep. It is tradition that the king speaks through the high priest. Ta-da! And therefore, even when the king himself is the one literally saying, I do or don't want something, if the high priest speaks for the king, it is the high priest whose word is recognized as the actual divine command of the king.
So, this is how this goes down. Her name is Tracy, Dios said, a handmaiden of your father. She has refused to take the potion. What potion? It is customary for a dead king to take servants with him into the netherworld, sire. Tepik nodded gloomily. It was a jealously guarded privilege, the only way a penniless servant could ensure immortality. He remembered grandfather's funeral and the discreet clamor of the old man's personal servants. It had made father depressed for days. Yes, but it's not compulsory. Yes, sire, it is not compulsory. Father had plenty of servants. I gather she was his favorite, sire. What exactly has she done wrong, then? Dios sighed as one might if one were explaining things to an extremely backward child. She has refused to take the potion, sire. I thought you said it wasn't compulsory, Dios. Yes, sire, it is not, sire. It is entirely voluntary. It is an act of free will, and she has refused it, sire. Ah, one of those situations. Jelly Baby was built on those sort of situations. Trying to understand them could drive you mad. If one of his ancestors had decreed that night was day, people would go groping around in the light. So, even though it is said directly to the king by the high priest and by the king that it's a voluntary process, Tracy is essentially going to be executed for refusing to commit suicide with the late pharaoh, who also didn't like the practice and didn't even want to be buried in a pyramid anyway.
Yep. And Dios very frequently speaks on behalf of the dead king, saying he would have wanted this or that as long as it goes along with his traditions. In some cases, with the former king literally hanging over his shoulder as a ghost, saying, no, that's not what I wanted. That's the exact opposite of what I wanted.
Yep, and even worse, like, the king gets to watch this because he's, dead and shackled to the pyramid, because that's how things work in Jelly Baby. And, well, he's already lamenting, like, he hated wearing the stupid king's mask in public, but it was tradition, so it had to be done. We have to look alike when we're alive, he thought, and now they make sure we're identical when we're dead. What a kingdom. So, yeah. The traditions run Jelly Baby. The king does not. And of course, by the traditions, we kind of just mean Dios, who is responsible for basically all of them, as we had discussed in the intro.
Yep.
But, well, Tepik shakes someone's hand. They immediately start screaming and trying to get their hand cut off because they have, forsaken the king.
They've been touched by the divine presence.
Yes, and now it's unfit. Like, they are unworthy of this arm. And while Tepik is desperately trying to calm him down, everyone else is just, nope, this is just the way it's done. You'd understand this if you hadn't left for so long, which he kind of hadn't even really wanted to do, but they made him. But once he had left, you get used to where you grow up. So, cutting to the actual jailbreak scene. I had it and I lost it.
Stupid bats.
Okay. Look, I've come to rescue you. Are you coming or not? I've only knocked out the guards. It's not their fault, but we haven't got a lot of time. I'm to be thrown to the crocodiles in the morning, whispered Tracy. The king himself decreed it. He probably made a mistake. Tracy's eyes widened in horrified disbelief. The Soul Eater will take me. Do you want it to? Tracy hesitated. Well then, said the figure, and he took her unresisting hand. He led her out of the cell, where she nearly tripped over the prone body of a guard. He nearly, Who are in the other cells? He said, pointing to the line of doors along the passage. I don't know. Let's find out, shall we? The figure touched a can to the bolts and hinges of the next door and pushed it open. The flare from the narrow window illuminated a middle-aged man seated cross-legged on the floor. I'm here to rescue you. The man peered up at him. Rescue? Yes, why are you here? I spoke blasphemy against the king. How did you do that? I dropped a rock on my foot. Now my tongue is to be torn out. The dark figure nodded sympathetically. A priest heard you, did he? No, I told a priest. Such words should not go unpunished, said the man virtuously. We're really good at it, Tepik thought. Mere animals couldn't possibly manage to act like this. You need to be a human being to be really stupid. And then the man shouts for the guards because someone's trying to take me out of prison. I want to be punished for doing the thing, even though it's really, really stupid. And that's kind of the issue. When you have a tradition that enforced, and Jelly Baby does seem to actively enforce them just due to the time loop nature of the pyramids, what can you do? Like, Tepik is the only one who has an issue with them, really, but that's because he's had so much time outside of Jelly Baby. So he's had much more experience with the traditions of Ankh-Morpork and their modern progress.
So you end up with this situation where basically Tepik is a person out of time in almost a literal sense. There, we finally get it. And he's experienced the modern world and what it has to offer, and how it differs so drastically from how things work in his homeland, that when he returns, it isn't a place that's all that amenable to him, as he's changed as a person. And as a result, I went the wrong way. As a result, he cannot wrap his head around the traditions because he's been exposed to ways of thinking that are alien to the ways of his culture. And to some degree, this happens, like, all the time. This is just basically, like, the differences between generations and the differences between of course, the differences between people who just live in different areas and have different societies and all that fun stuff. I guess it's not going to let me do this until I kill the boss.
Probably not. Yeah, it's one thing for your country to have a tradition that is actively harmful to you. It's another for you to be so thoroughly engrossed in said culture that you go out of your way to enforce these harmful traditions upon yourself when no one else would require it. Like, that's actually the case with the stonemason who had his hand cut off. Sire, if his colleagues had not stopped him, he would have done it himself, with a chisel, I understand. So, Tepik's insistence on pardoning him and making sure he doesn't have to have his hand cut off is pointless. Because, well, you can't stop him from feeling this way. Even if it makes no sense to Tepik, or to those of us who have not been, in Jelly Baby's culture. But it's even small, like, harmless things of, I wish I could have a real feather bed. Dios makes sure that the one he orders never arrives. I wish we could have, plumbing. Dios makes sure that the person he invited over from Ankh-Morpork never arrives. So, even those small inconsequential things that wouldn't really change any of the, grand scheme of traditions, not allowed.
Yep. Because even the smallest change is far too much. And that's kind of what inevitably happens when tradition is enforced too strictly, is it eventually reaches a point where there is no acceptable alternative. If you reach a point where the traditions are held that strongly, there is no amount of alteration that would be allowed. Don't want to do this puzzle right now. I'm just here for the other thing.
And there is also, just because their traditions are so strange to everyone around them, when the ambassadors from Ephebe and Sort show up, they are genuinely trying to wear something that will, be respectful of the local traditions. But to note Pratchett's footnote, some translation is needed here. If a foreign ambassador to the court of St. James wore, out of a genuine desire to flatter, a bowler hat, a claymore, a Civil War breastplate, Saxon trousers, and a Jacobean haircut, he'd create pretty much the same impression.
Ow.
Yep. I would just climb up and get the Grail Point before you die.
Wow, that was completely worthless. I knew it was software, but I thought it would be actually useful software.
But, yeah. So, this is not to say that all progress needs to be embraced willy-nilly for no reason. I mean, case in point, we are in the era of the NFT, which is thankfully coming to a easily predicted by anyone with a modicum of common sense crashing halt.
I was about to say, I'm pretty sure the era of the NFT is over now.
Oh, you barely got that.
Yeah, I just noticed how bad my health is. We're gonna just be really careful about this. Ah!
Let's go heal.
I got what I gave for.
But yeah, so that's the flip side of all of this. Like, tradition does not need to be held to for the sake of tradition itself. Most traditions come from a place of there being a genuine reason for them.
Yep. But they also need to be analyzed to ensure that they maintain their usefulness in regards to the reasons for which they were made, and if you reach a point where the tradition is no longer useful, be willing to set it aside. Now, if it's just...
Or to be fair, there are many traditions that we maintain that aren't exactly useful, but aren't exactly harmful. As a recovering Catholic, meatless Fridays during Lent doesn't really serve a whole lot of actual practical purpose, and these days it's mostly meant to be a symbolic fast, but it doesn't do any active harm to say, yeah, I'm not going to have a hamburger today.
Yep, which was going to be my next point, was as long as the tradition is not harmful and not inhibiting people unnecessarily, then there's often no harm in maintaining it, but you need to be willing to look at traditions in the light of that condition, and be willing to discard them if they meet the qualifications of no longer being useful. And that's kind of the problem that we run into with situations like with Dios, is you have a tradition that may have once served a useful purpose. And for many of those traditions, it's probably not too much trouble just to maintain for the sake of, this is a thing we do. It hurts nobody, it causes no problems, and while it doesn't actively address a problem that we used to deal with, it's not an active detriment in the modern day. But then you get to other traditions, such as, in this example, you cannot touch the king or be touched by the king, or else that part of your body is so holy that you must remove it from yourself. That's actively harmful in the modern day, and to be fair, probably was not something started out of a genuine desire or reason to help anyone. It seems like a way to punish people for daring to have direct personal contact with their betters, quote unquote. That's the kind of tradition that, when you assess them in the light of what is actually still useful versus what causes harm versus what is out of date but still harmless and still useful in the sense that it inspires a bit of civic pride and collective identity. And you have those three different categories to assess traditions by and ensure which side something falls into. Oop. And looking back through the book, most of Jelly Baby's traditions fall into the latter two categories. Either they are out of date and no longer necessary because the reasons they were created are no longer valid and they are no longer actively helpful, but they are also not necessarily actively harmful and therefore can probably be left to be. And then there are a bunch more that are actively harmful and either no longer helpful or never were helpful and were only created for the purposes of maintaining social strata. I'm gonna have to go heal again, given what I plan to do next.
Probably, yeah. And yeah, I would call, like, the King's Mask one of those harmful traditions, because they don't recognize the king without the mask. They don't recognize the king even speaking because it is tradition that the high priest does it for him, which means there's not even really a need for the king to be there.
Other than to lend the high priest authority.
Yep.
Which, to some degree, seems like working as intended, given some of the things that Dios says and does during the course of the story.
Such as trying to have Tepig executed in the name of the king as an intruder, even though Dios knows full well who Tepig is. But Tepig has been a very uncooperative king.
To put it in the words of another British entertainer, he's been a very naughty boy.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what else to add on this that doesn't just kind of go in circles.
Yep. Then next time, let's go fight us a lizard.
Oh boy, that's gonna go well.
See y'all next time.
I hate that lizard.